When I think back to the pivotal moments of my life, it feels like I've lived a dozen lifetimes. A modest beginning shaped much of who I am. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood where the largest commotion was the annual block party. My parents, both diligent and kind-hearted, instilled in me the value of hard work and loyalty. Yet as much as they tried to prepare me for life's uncertainties, nothing could have readied me for what was to come. As a young adult, I sought stability in my career and relationships, believing that with effort and honesty, life would naturally align itself. I graduated with a degree in accounting and found a decent job in a reputable firm. Life seemed on track, and I was confident in my choices. Then, I met Carrie, the woman I believed to be my soulmate, whose smile made every bad day worthwhile. Together, we built a life I thought was unshakable, until the cracks began to show. My name is Mike Adams, and on my psychiatrist's advice, I started keeping a journal to document my emotions and thoughts. I had recently gone through a devastating divorce, and coping with my feelings was a constant battle. The doctor suggested that writing about my experiences, emotions, and reflections could help me process the pain. Surprisingly, it worked, and journaling became a regular part of my routine. To begin with, I often feel like just another grim statistic, a victim of a failed marriage. I found out my wife, Carrie, was unfaithful, and now we're divorced. Her infidelity involved blackmail from her lover, my boss, Justin Bosner. But for me, that didn't lessen the blow. The thought of them together consumed me. From what I gathered, Justin took advantage of Carrie at a company event I couldn't attend. He got her drunk, took compromising photos, and used them to coerce her into further encounters. This discovery led to me attacking Justin, which resulted in my arrest. Luckily, my brother Tom, a talented attorney, argued that I acted under temporary insanity, and I was acquitted. Later, Justin tried to sue me for damages, but the jury sided with me when they heard the full story. I countersued him for wrecking my marriage and won a substantial financial settlement. Additionally, I filed a case against the company for failing to uphold its moral conduct policy, which resulted in another significant payout. Though I came out financially stable, I was left single and divorced. Carrie and I had been married for 8 years, and I believed our life together was everything I could have wanted. I only uncovered her betrayal by accident. One day, while she was out, her phone rang, and I answered. Before I could speak, I heard Justin's voice say, "I can't wait to have you." Shocked, I hung up. Moments later, Justin called again, and this time Carrie answered. Her troubled expression confirmed my suspicions, though she only said okay. That evening, she told me she was visiting a friend. I agreed, as we didn't have kids, and I thought nothing of her going out. I suppose I should introduce myself here. I'm Michael Adams, an accountant at a large firm. People call me Mike. I'm skilled at my job, though it doesn't excite me. Carrie works as a dental hygienist, and while others might find her more cute than beautiful, to me, she was the most stunning woman I'd ever known. I fell deeply in love with her the moment I met her. But after that phone call, I began to doubt everything about our marriage. I had to find out if she was cheating. When Carrie left, I followed her to a motel, where I saw her knock on a door. Justin, wrapped in a towel, opened it, pulled her close, and let her in. I waited 15 minutes, then approached the door and knocked, pretending to be a receptionist. When Justin opened the door, I stormed in. My wife was on the bed, undressed. Her horrified expression confirmed my worst fears. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered. "I didn't want to be here, but I had no choice." Furious, I attacked Justin. Then I turned to Carrie and said, "You claimed you had no choice. Well, here's one. Go home or don't. I suggest you don't." With that, I left. Back home, I poured a glass of scotch and drank it, trying to process everything. About 30 minutes later, the police arrived. After verifying my identity, they arrested me. I wasn't afraid, though I probably should have been. My anger consumed me. In jail, another inmate tried to intimidate me, but I fought back and sent him to the hospital. Security footage showed I acted in self-defense, sparing me further trouble. That night was chaotic. Both Justin and the inmate ended up in the hospital. In Justin's case, his injuries were severe, and he might never fully recover. Though I'm not a fighter by nature, my father taught my brothers and me to box when we were kids. That skill served me well, even though I'd never been in a real fight before. Despite everything, the physical pain I inflicted on Justin paled compared to the emotional pain I felt. The woman I loved most in the world betrayed me, leaving me to question whether our entire marriage had been a lie. Carrie tried to contact me in the days that followed, but I shut her out, burying my pain as best I could. I never wanted to experience such deep hurt again. When my brother arrived, I explained everything that had happened. He quickly secured my release on bail and took me to stay with him and his wife, Susan. They were incredibly kind, But I was in so much pain that I became unbearable to be around. Finally, one evening, Susan confronted me saying, "Mike, I know you're hurting, but your brother and I don't deserve this. If you're going to act like this, you might as well go back to your cheating wife or get a hotel room." Her words hit me hard, and I apologized. From that moment, I began thinking more clearly and behaving better. My brother and sister-in-law became my sanctuary, and I treated them as such. Tom, my brother, filed for my divorce and simultaneously initiated a lawsuit against my employer. Not long after, Justin sued me for the injuries I caused him. Tom was strategic and requested a stay of trial for Justin's suit until the criminal charges against me were resolved. Once I was found not guilty due to temporary insanity, Tom focused on Justin's case. Justin seemed smug as the trial began, expecting to profit from me, but he had no idea how thoroughly my brother had investigated him. By the time my criminal case concluded, Tom had uncovered testimonies from former employees revealing Justin's history of coercion and harassment. When the trial ended, the jury awarded me significant damages. Justin was immediately fired, but his troubles didn't stop there. He was also arrested for sexual attack. The case against him was complicated by a lack of physical evidence, but 6 women testified, sharing their stories. I didn't closely follow the trial since I was preoccupied with my divorce, but I recall hearing he was convicted of a lesser charge. It didn't matter much to me, only that he was sentenced to prison. Carrie was called to testify and attended every day of the trial. I distinctly remember that. People were disappointed he only received 7 years. While it was proven that Carrie had been sedated and blackmailed, I couldn't move past the betrayal. My mind remained fixated on the image of Carrie and Justin together. I filed for divorce, unable to see things from Carrie's perspective. If she had just trusted me and told me the truth, I could have dealt with Justin. But she didn't, and the fact that she kept going back made me question whether, deep down, she enjoyed it. The final divorce hearing was a nightmare. Carrie arrived with her lawyer and repeatedly tried to speak to me privately beforehand, but I avoided her. During the hearing, she kept trying to catch my eye, and when I finally looked, her expression was pleading. I was too hurt to care. When the judge granted the divorce, Carrie broke down, becoming hysterical. An ambulance was called, and I thought I'd never see her again. I was wrong. With my legal battles behind me, it was time to move forward. After all the lawsuits were resolved, my net worth was close to $3 million. Even after paying my brother 30% of my winnings against his protests, I was well off. But now I was divorced and wealthy, with no clear direction. Returning to my old job wasn't an option, and I had no interest in it anyway. My life felt adrift, and the pain lingered. It was Susan who suggested something that would change my life, though I wasn't sure if it was for the better at first. She encouraged me to take a trip to Europe, reminding me that I had always dreamed of traveling and now had the means. I'd always imagined making the trip with Carrie, but now I would go alone. My journey began in Italy, a country everyone seemed to rave about. While I appreciated the historical sites and excellent wine, I found the experience underwhelming. From there, I took a train to Germany, where I met an English woman named Sarah Smythe. She turned out to be an excellent travel companion and guide. Sarah was captivating with her blonde hair, soft brown eyes, petite frame, and infectious enthusiasm. She brought a refreshing energy that contrasted sharply with the dark months I had endured. Sarah, as it turned out, was a teacher at a school called Ludgrove. She spoke about it as though I should have known the name, but it was unfamiliar to me. I asked her about her work, and was surprised to learn she taught math and science to children aged 8 to 13. Her passion for teaching was evident, and the sparkle in her eyes as she talked about it was inspiring. Without Sarah, Germany might have been forgettable, but her deep knowledge of WW history brought the country to life for me. While I had never been particularly interested in the war, visiting historical sites with her made it fascinating. Before anyone assumes there was romance between us, let me clarify. There wasn't. Early in our conversations, Sarah mentioned she had recently ended a long-term relationship and wasn't ready for anything new. I assured her I felt the same, sharing details of my recent divorce. Surprisingly, Sarah showed a lot of compassion toward my ex-wife, which I hadn't expected. Though I wasn't looking for a new girlfriend, I was surprised by how many women flirted with me. I wondered if my scruffy 2-day stubble and longer hair gave me a bad guy look. Truthfully, my appearance wasn't intentional. I'd just gotten lazy since leaving work. The flirting, however, made me uncomfortable, and I constantly apologized to Sarah, especially when it happened in front of her. She found it amusing and teased me about the attention. To be fair, Sarah had her share of admirers too, and I teased her back. After Germany, I traveled alone to Sweden and Denmark, both of which I loved. The people were friendly, though the language barrier was tough without Sarah, who spoke 4 languages besides English: Italian, French, German, and Spanish. Still, I managed. We met up in Paris for the last 3 days of her vacation. While Paris itself was beautiful, I didn't care much for the locals, who seemed to harbor a disdain for Americans. Sarah faced more attention there than anywhere else. One man even interrupted our dinner to flirt with her. She ended it by tossing wine in his face, but he laughed until I stood up, towering over him. That finally sent him running. On my second night in Paris, I took Sarah to dinner and for a moonlit walk along the Seine. As we watched the boats, I thanked her for making my trip enjoyable. When I kissed her cheek, she surprised me by kissing me on the lips. I kissed her back, but we didn't discuss it. Instead, she shifted the conversation to Paris landmarks. That night, I went to bed feeling both embarrassed and content. On our last night, Sarah cooked a lovely dinner, and we talked for hours on her balcony. Later, as I passed her room, she emerged wearing a stunning white peignoir. She embraced and kissed me passionately. But when things escalated, I pulled away. "I'm sorry, Sarah," I said. "It's still too soon for me." Though disappointed, she understood and reassured me of her feelings. Afterward, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. The next day, we landed in London, said our goodbyes, and exchanged addresses, though I doubted we'd keep in touch. Before parting, I invited Sarah to dinner on my final vacation night, and she agreed. With 2 weeks left, I rented a Range Rover to explore the UK, planning to visit major English cities, Scotland and Wales. Unfortunately, those plans unraveled. Delays in London, a dead phone battery, and my decision to rely on a paper map instead of unpacking my charger led to a series of misadventures that derailed my carefully laid plans. I left the bank just before closing and studied the map briefly before deciding which way to go. An hour later, I was completely lost. I had left London but had no idea where I was. Asking for directions only made things worse. Frustrated, I pulled over to check the map again, but none of the roads I'd been on were listed. I rummaged through my bags for my phone charger, only to realize I'd left it at the hotel. I felt like an idiot, lost in a foreign country without a functioning phone. As night fell, I decided to assemble my Ruger 9mm for protection. Yes, I knew carrying a firearm was illegal in England, but I hadn't traveled without it. I had smuggled it through customs by disassembling it and disguising the parts. Thankfully, I hadn't needed it before, and I hoped I wouldn't now. With the tool loaded and tucked into my belt, I continued driving down the winding country road. Eventually, I saw a large mansion on a hill and hoped someone there could help. As I approached, I heard screams and 2 fire shots. Rushing to investigate, I saw 2 men lying on the ground, a man dragging a struggling boy toward a car and another yelling orders. When the man with the boy didn't comply with my command to drop his tool, he fired at me. I returned fire, hitting him in the shoulder. The boy broke free and ran as the second man gave chase. I managed to shoot the pursuer in the leg, but he quickly limped away. With no time to waste, I jumped back in my car. As I drove away, one of the men fired at me, grazing my side. Bleeding and in pain, I spotted the boy running parallel to the road. I braked, threw open the door, and shouted for him to get in. Hesitant but desperate, he climbed in, and I sped off, hoping to find the highway. At the end of the driveway, I chose to turn left. Unfortunately, a bad call. Instead of leading to the highway, the road took us deeper into the countryside, where houses were miles apart. As I drove, I realized I was nearly out of gas. "We're almost out of gas," I said, glancing at the boy. He looked confused until I repeated it. "What are we going to do?" he asked in a faint British accent. Despite the charm of his voice, the situation was dire, and finding help was my only focus. "I'm leaving this road," I said, sharply turning left and heading up a hill. Thankfully, the Range Rover made off-road driving easy, something that Mercedes in the driveway couldn't handle. Checking the compass on the dashboard, I told the boy, "We'll head south. London's that way." I glanced at him in the mirror. Though clearly scared, he kept calm, and I admired his composure. Most kids would be hysterical. "What's your name?" I asked as we drove. He hesitated, then stammered, George." I introduced myself as Mike. "Now, George, tell me what's going on." He nervously asked my full name, and when I told him, he replied timidly, "Thank you for saving me, Mr. Adams." I corrected him, "I haven't saved anyone yet," and pressed him for more details. I don't know exactly," George stammered. "I was at my friend Peter's house when these people broke in, put a bag over my head, and dragged me away. I don't know what happened to Peter, his parents, or their staff. It sounds like a hijacking, I speculated. They probably took Peter too. Let's keep moving until we find help. We drove through fields and streams, searching for any sign of civilization, but the countryside stretched on endlessly. After cresting one hill and descending into a field, the car began to sputter. Out of gas, I hid the vehicle behind some bushes and rummaged through my luggage for a flashlight. Grabbing 2 sweaters, a hat, water, and crackers, I told George we'd have to walk. They might figure out we abandoned the car, so we need to keep moving. Following the brightest star in the sky as our guide, we walked for hours, pausing occasionally to rest and drink water. Crossing streams, I resisted refilling the bottle, unsure of the water's safety. By midnight, George was visibly exhausted, but never complained. Spotting a thicket, I built makeshift beds of leaves and told him to sleep. He complied, falling asleep almost instantly. Once he was settled, I checked my wound. The bullet had left a deep cut on my side, still bleeding. Tearing my shirt, I made a crude bandage and threw a sweater over George to keep him warm. Putting on the other, I drifted into a restless sleep. The sunrise woke me, and as I moved, a sharp pain reminded me of my injury. George stirred, and when he sat up, I asked, "How are you feeling?" "Everything hurts," he admitted. I laughed softly. "Same here, have some crackers." I passed him a pack and watched as he ate quietly. He was still scared, but impressively calm. Handing him more crackers and water, I checked my wound. It had stopped bleeding, thankfully. "Sir," George asked timidly, "what will happen to us?" "We'll find help. Your parents will come for you, and I'll finish my vacation. After a trip to the doctor for stitches," I said lightly. George looked at me wide-eyed. "You seem brave, sir. I wish I was." "You are brave," I assured him. "Most kids would be terrified." "But I cried," he confessed. "You won't tell anyone, will you?" I smiled. "Not a word." "Listen, George," I said gently. "There's no shame in crying. It just means you care. Everyone cries at some point." George looked at me and admitted, "I just don't want to disappoint anyone." I smiled. "The only person you should never disappoint is yourself. Do what you believe is right, and you'll never owe anyone an apology." That made George laugh, lightening the mood. After gathering our things, we set off again. I was in pain, my wound clearly infected, and navigating without a guiding star made progress slower. I stuck to the trees, avoiding open fields, but it was exhausting. Helicopters circled in the distance, and I hoped they were searching for us. By midday, we ran out of water, forcing me to refill our bottle from a stream, praying it wouldn't make us sick. As night fell, we still hadn't found a single house. Later, I learned we'd unknowingly passed within a few hundred yards of several homes. Finding shelter in thick bushes, I made crude beds again, though fewer leaves made it uncomfortable. Feverish and weak, I struggled to sleep. The next day, I could barely keep up. George looked at me with concern, but I reassured him with a smile he didn't believe. By the second and third day, we talked more openly about his life, school, friend, and his strict parents. I reminded him again, the only person he needed to satisfy was himself. Toward evening, I felt worse, but we needed to cross an open field to continue. Halfway across, I heard the unmistakable roar of a diesel engine. A Mercedes appeared over the hill, speeding straight toward us. "Run, George!" I shouted as we sprinted to a cluster of fallen trees. Bullets whizzed by as the car approached. Taking cover, I gripped George's hand. "Listen carefully, keep running. Hide when the shooting stops, and don't come out until they're gone." He hesitated, but I pushed him, and he took off just as the car reached 30 meters away. Shots came from the car, and I returned fire. The men, caught off guard by my Colt, swerved and crashed, using the car as cover. From my position, I counted 5 armed men. I fired cautiously, keeping them pinned as I prayed George had escaped. As the firefight continued, a bullet struck my chest, knocking me to the ground. Dizzy and in pain, I saw one man approach. Big mistake. I fired, hitting him. As I tried to keep fighting, my strength failed, and I began to lose consciousness. Just then, I heard the roar of helicopters. Armed rescuers descended from ropes, engaging the attackers. Moments later, everything went black as I closed my eyes. I woke to a bright light and sharp pain. A woman stood nearby, and I heard someone say, "We need to get him to the operating room." Then everything went dark again. When I woke next, I felt like I was floating. The room was bright, and I was pain-free. A nurse was checking my pulse, and when she saw my eyes open, she smiled. "Welcome back, Mr. Adams," she said in a cheerful British accent. "You gave us quite a scare, but the doctor says you're finally out of danger." My throat was raw, but I managed to croak, "Boy." She reassured me. "Everything is fine. Someone will explain soon." Though her response left me anxious, I quickly fell asleep. Later, I woke briefly in the night to eat soup and drink juice, then drifted off again. By morning, a doctor was by my bed. Seeing me awake, he smiled. "The boy is fine. He was distraught when you arrived, covered in your blood and refusing to leave your side. Is he family?" I shook my head, exhausted, and fell asleep again. When I woke again, it was still daylight. A nurse came in, asking how I felt. "My throat, chest, and side hurt," I whispered. "I'll bring something for the pain," she replied. "There's someone who wants to speak with you. Are you up for it?" I nodded. A man in his 40s with gray hair and a mustache entered and introduced himself as Inspector Blair from Scotland Yard. Sitting beside me, he said, "I'd like to get an informal statement if you're able." Surprised by the steadiness of my voice, I agreed. The inspector began, "You've been through a lot. The doctors were concerned about your breathing and infection, but you seem to be recovering. Can you tell me what happened last Monday?" Gathering my thoughts, I explained, "I think it was a hijacking. George and I were on the run for days, trying to find help. When the hijackers caught up, I held them off so George could escape." The inspector smiled knowingly. "How did you end up at the mansion where the hijacking occurred?" Embarrassed, I admitted. "I got lost. My phone was dead, and I couldn't navigate with a paper map. I stumbled onto the mansion while looking for directions and saw the hijacking in progress. I used my Colt to free George. We escaped in my car but ran out of gas and had to walk." The inspector continued. "Search teams and helicopters were already scouring the area. A helicopter spotted the speeding car and followed it to your firefight. You and George were taken to the hospital. At first, we thought George was seriously injured, but it was your blood. He refused to leave your side. I told him he was brave." Leaning back, the inspector smiled. "This is quite the story." "It's the truth," I insisted. "Ask George." "Oh, I believe you," he said. "But there's one issue. The Colt. Where did you get it?" Caught off guard, I hesitated. Finally, I admitted, "I brought it from the U.S." The inspector chuckled. "Actually, the Colt we found had its serial numbers filed off. It seems you acquired it from the hijackers. That's your story, isn't it?" The inspector's comment snapped me into clarity. It was giving me a chance to plausibly deny owning the Colt. I seized the opportunity. "Yes, that's right," I said quickly. "I surprised one of the hijackers and managed to take the tool from him." "Excellent," the inspector replied, standing. "I could use a cup of tea. You?" "To be honest, I'd liquidate for a coffee." He laughed. "I'll see what I can do." 10 minutes later, he returned with tea, coffee, and a plate of what I assumed were biscuits. After a sip, the inspector began, "I have a lot to explain, Mr. Adams. First, the boy you know as George is actually Peter, the future Duke of Windsor, what you might call the future King of England." The revelation left me speechless. The inspector continued, "Peter was spending the weekend at the Ashford estate, his friend George's home. The attack was well planned. 2 guards were eliminated, 3 seriously injured, and the rest neutralized. If you hadn't stumbled upon it, they would have succeeded, and we wouldn't have known until it was too late." When he called me a hero, I shook my head. "I don't feel like one. Honestly, I just feel nauseous." "Do you need help?" he asked. "No," I replied weakly. "We need to decide what happens next." The inspector nodded, finishing his tea. News of the attempted hijacking spread fast. Now that the prince is safe, the nation is celebrating, but there's immense pressure to solve this. Every investigative agency is involved. I suddenly panicked. If this was terrorism, my family and I could be at risk. "Can I ask something?" I said. "Of course," he replied. "Could you leave my name out of this?" He raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "For safety," I explained. "If terrorists are involved, they might retaliate against me or my family." The inspector considered this. "I understand. I'll discuss it with my boss. For now, we'll keep your identity confidential. Do you need us to notify anyone on your behalf?" "Maybe my parents," I said after a moment. "What day is it?" "Friday the 6th, he replied. "I've been out for almost a week," I murmured. "I'm supposed to fly home in a week. Can you email them using my account and say I'm extending my trip? We've already checked your itinerary and tracked the places you plan to stay. No one's contacted you yet. Also, I promised to have dinner with Sarah Smythe on Saturday," I added, remembering. The inspector's eyebrows rose. "How do you know Miss Smythe?" "I met her on a train to Germany. She became a friend and an unofficial guide. Nothing romantic," I clarified. "I see," he said, standing. "We'll email her to say you were in an accident, not seriously injured, and we'll return to the U.S. soon. Meanwhile, officers will guard your room until we determine the next steps. You'll also remain incommunicado for now. Is that a problem?" I shook my head. The following days were tough. As I recovered, my pain medication was reduced, leaving me sore, especially after physical therapy. Watching the news brought mixed emotions. Grateful celebrations for the prince's rescue and outrage over the police's failure to prevent the hijacking. After a couple of days of endless coverage, I stopped watching. The ordeal had left me with lingering unease, and I suspected I was dealing with mild PTSD. Just when I thought Inspector Blair had forgotten about me, he arrived on Tuesday. I was hoping for good news about my discharge. Standing by the window, longing to be outside, I turned as he entered. "You look much better, Mr. Adams," he said. "I'm glad to see your recovery. I have some updates." "Sounds promising," I said, sitting on the bed. "We're making progress investigating the hijacking. While we don't know who's behind it, we captured 2 suspects alive and hope one will talk. That makes my request even more important," I replied. "I hope my name stays out of this." The inspector smiled. "You're unique, Mr. Adams. Most would crave recognition, but you prioritize your family's safety. You'll be glad to hear my superiors agreed to keep your identity confidential. Initially, some suspected you might be involved in the conspiracy, but tracking data from your rental car and testimony from the prince cleared all doubts." "Good to know," I said with relief. "I assume this means I can return to the U.S. once discharged?" "Absolutely," Blair confirmed. "In fact, leaving the country quickly is safest for you. We've informed your parents via email that you had limited cell coverage. You'll be discharged Saturday and on a flight that afternoon, with security escorting you to the airport." On Friday, Blair returned my phone and said I could call my family. I told my parents I'd had a minor bike accident but was fine. My mom wanted to fly over, but I reassured her I'd be home before she could book a ticket. Saturday morning, eager to leave, I dressed after breakfast. Around 11 a.m., I heard voices in the corridor and saw a well-dressed couple and a boy walking toward my room. It took a moment to recognize Peter, the prince. As they passed, everyone bowed or curtsied, an unreal sight. Peter hurried ahead of his parents when he saw me. "Your Highness," I greeted him with a nod. "Mr. Adams, I'm so glad to see you well," he said, smiling. "I was terrified when they airlifted you. Thank you for saving me." By then, the king and queen had reached us. "Your Majesties," I said, bowing slightly. "This is an incredible honor." "No, Mr. Adams, the honor is ours," the king replied, shaking my hand. I was stunned, knowing I could never share this moment. The queen added, "We can never thank you enough for saving our son. I shudder to think what might have happened without you. You'll always be in our prayers." She briefly shook my hand before surprising me by lifting it to kiss it. "You can be very proud of your son," I said. "He was brave in incredibly tough circumstances. Without him, I doubt we'd have made it." The meeting ended quickly, as the royal family avoided drawing too much attention to me. Later, I learned their visit wasn't on their official schedule, but was insisted upon to personally thank me. I was deeply moved by the gesture. During my time in the hospital and the flight home, I reflected deeply on my life and felt dissatisfied. When I arrived, my parents greeted me warmly. My mom hugged me tightly, relieved I was okay, while my dad, who rarely hugged, surprised me by embracing me too, though I winced from the soreness of my wounds. At the baggage carousel, my mom hesitated before admitting she had done something that might upset me. She directed my attention to Carrie, standing near the exit, looking pale and tearful. Weeks earlier, I would have been furious, but my near-death experience shifted my perspective. Instead of the unfaithful wife, I saw a lonely, remorseful woman who still seemed to love me. I approached Carrie, smiled, and softly said, "Hi, Carrie. Thank you for coming." She broke down, apologizing repeatedly as she sobbed into my shoulder. I calmed her and led her to my parents. Trying to ease the tension, I suggested dinner, claiming I was starving. It wasn't a sudden fix for our issues, but it was a start. I no longer wanted to punish Carrie. I wanted her to be happy. A few days later, we met for lunch to discuss our problems, and soon after, we started therapy. Over time, I realized I had unintentionally reinforced Carrie's fear of disappointing me by excessively praising her successes and showing my disappointment when she fell short. It took 6 months of effort, but we worked through our issues, and I realized I'd never stopped loving her. We remarried in a small backyard ceremony at our parents' house, and our mothers were especially thrilled. For our honeymoon, we went on a cruise, choosing to reconnect emotionally before becoming intimate. That first night, we were both nervous, but the connection felt deeper than ever before. Carrie's beauty and warmth captivated me, as they had when we first met, and our honeymoon was filled with love and joy. 2 months later, Carrie became pregnant, and 7 months after that, we welcomed our son, Grant, followed by our daughter, Louise, 11 months later. 3 years later, Carrie returned to work part-time. Initially, I supported her new job, but lingering doubts from the past began to surface. Though Carrie gave me no reason to worry, my jealousy and suspicions grew, creating tension in our marriage. I didn't realize it at the time, but I started distancing myself emotionally, bracing for a betrayal that never came. The strain led to frequent arguments, and eventually I began considering divorce. Carrie convinced me to see a psychologist again, and though progress was slow at first, I eventually saw how much I had contributed to our problems. As I worked on myself, our relationship improved, and life was wonderful for the next year, until disaster struck. Unbeknownst to us, Justin Bosner was released early from prison. One night, after putting the kids to bed, we heard the sound of windows shattering. I went to investigate while Carrie checked on the kids. In the living room, I found Justin, pointing a tool at me. "I've been waiting for this moment," he sneered, threatening both me and Carrie. As he taunted me, Carrie burst into the room and grabbed the tool. In the struggle, it went off, and Carrie was shot in the stomach. I punched Justin, knocking him unconscious, and called emergency, holding Carrie as I tried to stop the bleeding. Carrie looked up at me, her voice weak. "You're the only one I've ever loved. Take care of our children." Her eyes closed, and they never opened again. Despite the hospital's efforts, her injuries were too severe. I was devastated, but our mother stepped in to care for the children while I was in shock. Justin was arrested for murder, but committed self-destruction in prison before his trial, leaving me angry at his escape from justice. My children became my reason to recover, and though I was still grieving, I focused on being there for them. It was my mother who suggested we travel. Reluctant at first, I eventually agreed and planned a trip to the UK, with both sets of grandparents coming along to help with the kids. By then, I felt less apprehensive about returning to England. About 18 months after the attack, Scotland Yard uncovered the details of the Crown Prince's hijacking plot. It was orchestrated by a small anti-monarchist group, including 2 insiders at Buckingham Palace. Many group members received prison sentences, and the ultimate goal was revealed to be the prince's assassination. Using funds I'd invested after my divorce, which had grown to $5 million, I splurged on first-class tickets, a stay at the Langham in London, and a minibus for a tour of Scotland and Wales. I hoped this trip would help heal the lingering pain and guilt I felt over Carrie's death and my earlier mistrust of her love. However, I didn't realize I was about to be thrust into the spotlight. When I asked Inspector Blair to keep my name out of the Crown Prince's case, I assumed it would remain sealed forever. Instead, the records were unsealed 5 years later, and my name became public. By the time we arrived in the UK, persistent reporters had pieced together our travel plans. If I'd known what was coming, I would have canceled the trip and gone somewhere private. But unaware of the brewing media storm, I embarked on what I hoped would be a journey to mend my heart and honor Carrie's memory. While packing for my trip, I found Sarah Smith's old phone number. Assuming it was likely disconnected, I called anyway on the off chance it was still hers. To my surprise, Sarah answered, and she remembered me immediately. We spoke for 2 hours, catching up on the past 6 years. I told her about remarrying Carrie and having 2 children, and she shared that she was now an assistant principal. She also opened up about her short, disastrous marriage and bitter divorce. Feeling the conversation grow heavy, I told her about Carrie's murder and my efforts to rebuild my life. Sarah was silent for a moment, then began to sob. "Michael," she said softly, "you have your children, and in time, you'll see how truly blessed you are." Grateful for her kind words, I shifted the conversation to lighter topics, and she shared humorous stories about her students. Eventually, I revealed my reason for calling. "I'm bringing the kids and their grandparents to England," I explained. "I'd love for you to join us on part of the trip." Sarah apologized, saying she couldn't leave during the semester, but eagerly agreed to have dinner with me and my family. We set tentative plans to meet after my arrival. Our flight landed early, and I insisted everyone stay awake until the local bedtime to adjust to the time zone. Though the kids were excited, my parents and Carrie's parents reluctantly went along with the plan. After settling into our rooms, I called Sarah to confirm dinner for the next evening. That day, we explored London, visiting the Tower of London, taking a boat ride on the Thames, and going to Legoland Windsor. It was a fantastic day, and I went to bed happier than I had been in a long time. The next morning, I woke to a knock at the door. Half asleep, I hurriedly dressed and opened it to find the hotel manager, James Batterman, holding a newspaper. Apologizing for the early intrusion, he explained that he urgently needed to speak with me. He motioned for a waiter to wheel in a cart of breakfast items, poured me a cup of coffee, and asked me to sit down. "There's news I'm certain you're unaware of," he began, his tone serious. As soon as I sat down, Mr. Batterman unfolded the newspaper in front of me. The headline read, "Prince Peter hijacking mystery solved." Beneath it was a large color photo of me. I quickly scanned the article and groaned. My thoughts were racing in every direction, but the main concern was protecting my children. After reading enough to realize I'd been completely exposed, I looked up at Mr. Batterman. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Right now, hundreds of people and dozens of media representatives are outside the hotel, hoping to catch a glimpse of you. Rumors have leaked that you're in London and staying here. TV stations have been talking about you all morning. I expect the crowd outside to grow. I've already contacted the police for crowd control. Simply put, Mr. Adams, you've become a media sensation. All of Britain wants to know everything about you." My mind was spinning, and I still had no idea what to do, but I suddenly realized why Mr. Batterman had come to see me. "I assume you'd like us to stay elsewhere?" "Oh, heavens, no," Mr. Batterman exclaimed, looking horrified. "I'm just here to update you and assure you that we'll do everything we can to protect your privacy." "What do you suggest?" I asked, still overwhelmed and scared. These were just my first reactions to the chaos. It only got worse in the following days. "I'd advise you and your family to stay here at least for today," Mr. Batterman recommended. "Hopefully the excitement will die down, and people will lose interest. I'll contact my head office for additional suggestions." "The only issue with that is we have dinner plans with a friend at Padella's restaurant," I replied. After a moment of thought, he proposed a solution. "Why not invite your friend here? Our hotel has a 4-star restaurant that seats only 46, so it's quiet and private." I agreed that it was a great idea and decided to cancel the original reservation. "Please let me handle this for you," he offered, and I accepted. Still in shock, I couldn't even process what was happening outside. "Mr. Batterman, may I ask you something?" I hoped he could help me make sense of it all. "Of course. I'll answer as best I can. Why is this such a big deal now? The hijacking happened over 6 years ago. Sure, maybe the police missed some details, but does it matter? The prince is safe and sound." He paused thoughtfully and then smiled. "Mr. Adams, you're American, so our royal family may seem like a curiosity to you. But for the British, the monarchy is the foundation of our nation. The crown prince's hijacking stunned the country, casting a shadow of fear and sorrow. When he was rescued, the entire nation celebrated for 3 days. To learn now that you saved him and sought no recognition has captured the imagination and gratitude of this country. My staff and I see it as an honor to serve you. Also, during your stay at the Langham, you won't pay for anything." "No, I can't agree to that," I protested. "Our presence here is already causing trouble for you and your team." "If it helps ease your mind," he replied, raising his hands, "I spoke with head office this morning, and they're thrilled with the publicity. Bookings are already up by more than 18%. When he left, Grant and Louise came out of their bedroom. Breakfast, courtesy of Mr. Batterman, included bacon, eggs, bagels, Danish cheese, and oatmeal. I made plates for them and set them in front of the TV, starting their favorite movie, Toy Story. Then, I made some phone calls. First, I called a family meeting, waking up both grandparents and asking them to come to my room immediately. Then I called Sarah to explain the change of plans. She answered on the first ring. "Michael, I can't believe what I'm seeing on TV. Is it true?" "Unfortunately, it's all true," I confirmed. "I'm sorry I wasn't honest with you. I wanted to leave it all in the past." "So that's why you canceled our dinner plans?" she asked, her tone a mix of question and statement. "Yes, and I'm sorry I deceived you," I admitted. The British government agreed it was best for me to leave quietly. "Is it true about your injuries? They're saying you almost died. Are they exaggerating?" "Not exaggerated," I said simply, hoping to change the subject. "But there's nothing special about it. Let's talk about dinner instead." "Michael, this is important," Sarah protested. I thought she was upset, but her voice softened. "You went through this alone, and then came home to lose your wife like that." She began to cry, and my heart broke all over again. "Please, Sarah, don't cry. I'm fine now. I just wanted to check if you'd mind having dinner at the hotel tonight. Considering everything going on, I'd understand if you don't want to come. The media frenzy here is out of control." "I'll absolutely be there," Sarah replied instantly. "There's no way I'm letting you cancel another dinner with me. See you at 6. When my grandparents arrived, I handed them the newspaper and turned on the TV. Every news channel was talking about me. I was overwhelmed with worry. Looking out the hotel window, I saw hundreds of people gathered outside, with police barricades controlling the crowd. The scene felt surreal. As my mother read the newspaper, she suddenly broke down in tears. "What's wrong, Mom?" I asked, alarmed. "You nearly died and you never told us?" she sobbed. I explained my reasoning, admitting that I'd kept it a secret to protect the family, in case terrorists were behind the hijacking. Later, when it was clear they weren't, I saw no reason to bring it up. I wasn't sure my mother was satisfied with my explanation, but she accepted it. Before heading to dinner, we gathered in my room. Sarah looked stunning, and my parents were clearly charmed by her, quickly warming up to her as she regaled them with amusing stories about her job as an assistant to the headmistress. Dinner began on an awkward note as the entire restaurant stood and applauded when we entered. Then, guests started approaching our table to introduce themselves and express their thanks. I smiled politely and introduced them to my family and Sarah. After some time, Grant leaned over and asked, "Dad, are you famous?" "Apparently, yes," I replied, "but it's not something I wanted." Amid all this, Sarah shared the first piece of good news that day. After explaining the situation to her school board, they approved 2 weeks of paid leave. She could now travel with us and even serve as our guide. The only remaining question was whether we could actually manage the trip. Halfway through dinner, Mr. Batterman approached our table. "I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but may I have a word with you, Mr. Adams?" I excused myself and followed him to a quiet spot near the kitchen. Looking around to ensure privacy, he said, "I spoke to our head office, and they have an idea. They believe an impromptu press conference tomorrow could help ease the media frenzy. We could host it in our ballroom. Of course, the decision is entirely up to you." I thought it over and found the suggestion reasonable. "I think it's a great idea. What do I need to do?" "Nothing at all," he said with a smile. "We'll handle everything. I suggest 10 a.m. tomorrow. Just prepare a brief statement and be ready for 30 minutes of questions." When I told my parents and in-laws about the press conference, they were impressed. My kids were far more interested in the cake and ice cream they were promised for the next day. I, on the other hand, was terrified. I had never spoken in public before, and the thought of doing so now left me shaken. The next morning at 9:50, Mr. Batterman led me to the ballroom. I was amazed at the transformation. The back wall was decorated with American and British flags, while red, white, and blue garlands were strung across the room. The hotel orchestra was stationed to the right of the podium, where the American and British flags crossed in front. As I walked toward the podium, I noticed hundreds of people and television cameras in the room. My legs felt like jelly as the crowd began to clap and cheer, growing louder with every step I took. My family followed and was seated in the front row. My children's wide eyes scanned the room in awe, while both my mother and mother-in-law had tears streaming down their faces. My kids, meanwhile, bounced in their chairs, excitedly peppering their grandparents with questions. As I stepped onto the platform, the orchestra began playing the Star-Spangled Banner, followed by God Save the King. When the music ended, Mr. Batterman took the microphone to welcome everyone and introduced me. I gave a short speech, expressing my gratitude for the attention, but admitting I didn't feel I deserved it. Then came the questions. Reporters asked how I found the prince. I explained that I hadn't known he was royalty until I was in the hospital. I recounted how I had been hopelessly lost and was merely seeking directions when everything unfolded, a response that drew laughter from the seasoned journalists. They were particularly interested in the shootout. I kept my remarks brief, focusing on praising the military personnel who saved us. I emphasized that without them, both the prince and I might not have survived. Their bravery deserved all the recognition. After Mr. Batterman thanked everyone, reporters kept shouting questions. I answered a few as I left the hall and returned to my room, where my children excitedly told me about the crowd. The grandparents were thrilled. None of us had expected this when we planned the trip. A knock at the door interrupted us, and I opened it to see Sarah smiling. I hugged her and thanked her for coming. She laughed, saying, "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." "Michael, you were amazing. The press loved your humility and your admiration for the prince." The next day, we were invited to Buckingham Palace, even Sarah. I learned she was a schoolmate of the Queen, and, to my surprise, her real name was Lady Sarah Smythe. Her father was a duke, though I tuned out the family history. We finally began our tour with government-provided security. Sarah appreciated the protection, so I didn't argue. Our first stop was Manchester, where I hoped to glimpse the United Field. Instead, the club organized a reception for my family, Sarah and me, allowing us onto the field and introducing us to players. Their kindness amazed me. In Liverpool, we enjoyed a quiet visit, thanks to the royal family's request for privacy. We mingled with the crowd and explored freely. Continuing north, Sarah's knowledge made every stop enriching and enjoyable. In Glasgow and Edinburgh, we settled at a base for day trips. As the media interest faded, I felt relieved. I couldn't imagine choosing the life of a celebrity. Over time, I grew deeply attached to Sarah. My family adored her, and the children were smitten. Casual acquaintances turned into close friends, and one evening, while gazing at Edinburgh Castle, I kissed her. She seemed surprised, but responded passionately. That night, we confessed our feelings. Sarah worried about being hurt, but I reassured her, admitting she made me feel love again after my wife's death. Her response was overwhelming, and our connection deepened. At 2 a.m., I slipped back to my room to keep our relationship private, though my family's knowing smiles the next morning suggested otherwise. The tour ended too soon, and we returned to London. My mother watched the kids so Sarah and I could spend one last night together. Leaving was emotional, and Sarah feared I'd forget her back home, but I knew that wasn't possible. In the months that followed, Sarah and I spoke daily, sometimes several times a day. The kids adored her, especially her funny and imaginative stories. Eventually, I couldn't bear the distance and flew to London to propose. Sarah happily accepted. We visited her father, the Duke of Stirling, who lived on their sprawling estate supported by farming and public tours of the family home. He smiled as he asked, "So you want to marry my little Sarah?" After assuring him my love for her was unconditional, he chuckled and gave his blessing. The wedding, modest yet larger than I preferred, included about 100 guests, among them the king and queen. Peter, now a teenager, also attended with a young companion. My father was my best man, and my children participated in the ceremony. Sarah and I honeymooned in Bermuda before settling into a life split between England during the school year and the U.S. in summer. Grant and Louise attended Ludgrove, a school often chosen by royalty. Sarah adopted the children, completing our family. Occasionally, the Queen asked us to perform royal duties, such as hospital visits and school openings. Though hesitant at first, I grew to enjoy these outings, especially with Sarah's encouragement and her affectionate rewards later. Peter kept in touch, transforming from a frightened boy into a confident, charismatic young man. I was immensely proud of him, as though he were my own son. 2 years into our marriage, Sarah gave birth to Michael Jr., followed by Charlotte a year later, and Thomas 18 months after that. After the pain of the past, life finally felt joyful and complete. Approaching our 5th anniversary, we planned a quiet celebration. I gifted Sarah a gold necklace adorned with heart-shaped charms engraved with our children's names and birth dates. She loved it and wore it daily.
On our anniversary, we had dinner and saw a play. I was lost in thoughts of my love for Michael and our plans for later that night. But as we left the restaurant, my drunken ex-husband confronted us with a Colt, shouting, "If I can't have you, no one can." Michael shielded me, taking the bullet meant for me. I screamed for help as he collapsed. Michael spent 3 days in the hospital. On the 3rd evening, he opened his eyes and with his last strength told me he loved me before his heart stopped. 2 months have passed since that night. Writing in Michael's diary has been agonizing, especially as my tears smudge the ink on many pages. Our children and I are grieving deeply, but I must stay strong for them. My ex-husband was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Michael's death deeply affected people in both the U.S. and U.K. As a veteran, he was honored with a military funeral in his hometown, attended by the King, Queen, and Peter, who broke down as the coffin was lowered. In a rare moment, the Queen embraced her son as he wept. "I'm trying to rebuild my life." Michael left me one final gift. At dinner that night, I told him I was pregnant. Our daughter Mary was born recently. She has Michael's eyes and smile. I hold on to her as a symbol of hope, trying my best to raise our children as Michael would have wanted. God give me strength. I love and miss him every day.